So welcome everyone. My name is Gering, and I am here to talk about cardiac project management, which probably has you wondering, is this like guerrilla marketing or what on earth is it? Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself, give you a little bit of background, and then we're going to go on a little bit of a journey. So my story, I grew up in a little town outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called Menomonee Falls. Those of you that may have been there, interestingly enough, it got its name because of a big waterfall. Bernie and Sue were my parents. There you can see them praising me, giving thanks for such a wonderful son. I had 3 sisters who would kill me if they saw this picture right now. And I think I had a pretty normal youth, right? I had the G.I. Joe years. Then for a while, I thought I would be a great architect. I had a career in show business for a while. I would be the tiger on the left. But eventually, I gave that up and decided college was probably the best thing for me. So I headed, guess where I did my undergrad? Marquette University. Marquette was very different in those days. For those of you that may be familiar with the campus, there are buildings now that just used to be bars and bars and bars and bars. The opening of school, the beginning of classes each school year, there'd be a huge block party where beer trucks would roll up and there'd be bands and music, and it was a great way to start off the semester. Unfortunately, things are a little bit different now, but those were great times. After college, what I refer to as the bearded years, I started to sort of form a fondness for computers. Computers in those days were pretty unreal. They were small. I bought this one at a jewelry store because it was made by Timex. It hooked up via cables to your television, and if you wanted to run programs, you hooked up your cassette tape recorder and you loaded the programs that way. Powerful, powerful processors. Unbelievably so. Take a look at what the CPU was and look at the RAM, 2K. I think your refrigerator probably has more memory now. I still have that computer, but now it serves kind of a different purpose as a great doorstop. After Marquette, I spent a number of years at the University of Miami, and then I came back to Marquette University, it's hard to believe, about 11 years ago. Time flies. So at Marquette, I teach graduate classes and undergraduate classes in management, organizational behavior, leadership. It was my privilege to work with a gentleman on a book about forecast scheduling, and he gave me a little recognition. It's nice to have your name on Amazon for something other than purchases. I also try and participate actively within the university. I sit on the executive committee of the Senate, the University Senate itself, the Faculty Council, and chair a couple of subcommittees. Perhaps my most famous Marquette moment was on the front page of the Milwaukee Journal when I photobombed our president during his inauguration. What am I most known for, though? Probably what I am most known for, actually, without a doubt, is my cycling escapades. I have been a cyclist for the last 10 or 15 years. I ride with a great group of guys. We go out just about every day, cycling somewhere. We have participated in a crazy ride called RAGBRAI, which stands for the Register's Annual Great Ride Across Iowa. It's about 450 miles, 450 to 500 miles in a week. So you can do the math, 70 to 100 miles a day. And I do want to point out that Chuck Norris never rode Bragg-Bragg. We are also crazy folks and believe that all weather is good weather. So I was riding in the rain this past Sunday. This was about a 60-mile ride that got cut short. You can see President Lovell on the far right. We tried to go to Holy Hill, but decided it would be better to turn back. It was 40 degrees and raining. Again, all weather is good weather, so that includes snow. This is on the trail called the Bug Line Trail a couple weeks ago. It's a lot of fun, believe it or not. No, it's really crazy. No, it really is fun. So cycling has been a unique thing in my life. It has forged relationships, taken me places. I've seen things, met people that I never would have. It's really been a blessing in my life, which makes it all the more surprising that 8 months ago, life looked very different. As I sat in a hospital room after undergoing heart surgery. And clearly I was having a bad hair day as well. So if you'd like, I'd like to ask your indulgence and take you on a journey for a little bit. We're going to talk about what led up to that day. And then we're going to also talk about, strangely enough, how project management found its way into this whole endeavor. So how did it all start? Well, it all started with an annual physical. I'm sure many of you go and do this. Probably some of you don't, but I would recommend going for an annual physical. I always went around my birthday, which is in the first week of May, which makes me a Taurus. Which probably tells you a lot about me right now. And so, you go and see your doctor, he listens to your heart, he always says, "You're my youngest patient, get out of here, it's more of a social call." You do some generic blood work, and so I do this blood work, and my cholesterol is 170, and my HDL and LDL are all great numbers, and life looks good. But I asked him to do an extra test. I cycled with a guy who was going up a hill one day and started to have some heart issues. He was out of breath. Oh, this is the hill we go up all the time. It's by Potawatomi Casino, for those familiar with the area. And there was another person that I knew who went in to have a hernia repaired and came out with triple bypass because they found something wrong with his heart. So this was in my mind when I went. I said, okay, all right, let's have a cardiac stress test too. He's like, "Are you sure it's a lot of money?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's, probably time. Let's just see what it's about." "Well, with all of those miles that you do," "I know, I rode 8,000 miles last year on the bike, but let's do one anyways." So we scheduled it for later that week. It was a Thursday. And so I go out to the Aurora Clinic in Menominee Falls, and I walk up to the front desk, and they look through papers, and there's whispering, people going in back and talking. And I'm like, what's going on? And they say, "Well, we're sorry, we didn't get insurance authorization, so your appointment is canceled today." Heavy sigh. But then the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I started to turn red, because part of the prep work for this test is no coffee. For like 24 hours. It's so unreasonable. So I'm like, "I'm sorry, I know you didn't get insurance authorization, but I have really good insurance. Here is where I work. I'm here, you're here. Let's go take some pictures." Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Gering, but we just don't have, I'll pay for it, right? I have checks with me, so I must have money left in my account. Let's go do it. But we don't have any isotopes. I'll go help you find some. Where do we look? So a bunch of people going back and more talking. And it was, okay, can you come back at 2? Like, okay, I can make it 4 more hours with no caffeine. So I came back. And how many, has anyone ever had a cardiac stress test before? Couple folks. So there's 2 parts, right? One is radioactive, where they put dye in you and take pictures of you at rest and then after stress. And then the other portion is they put an EKG on you and look at your heart before and after stress. So you hop on the treadmill, you're all hooked up. First they inject you with dye, which sort of gives you a hot flash. And then they take a bunch of pictures. That takes about 10 minutes, and you just sit there as this thing moves over you. Then you go into the treadmill room, and they start you out walking very slowly. And then they speed it up. And I was teasing, of course, my doctor, yawning. Okay, when are we going to? Anyway, so they get your heart rate up to 160. And then all the time while they're recording an EKG. And then they hop you off and give you more dye, and in 2 minutes they start taking more pictures. So they get 2 different profiles, right? An EKG and a radiography when your heart is at rest, and another one when it's been under stress. And then the waiting begins. So you get to go home, right? Change out of your scrubs, and the doctor's right there during the whole time, blah, 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 everything looks great, okay, we'll see you. And you head home and you try and fight traffic, because now it's Thursday at about 5 o'clock and you're driving all the way through downtown rush hour traffic. Then your cell phone rings. And it's your doctor. Never a good thing. Kurt? Yeah? We found something. Like, what? Yeah. The EKG showed some ischemia. So some blockage. What? Kurt. With a K, right? Yeah. Evaluation of ST segments showed depressions, signaling ischemia. So that big line you see on the EKG is called the QRS complex. And the little bump that comes after it is called the T wave. And so in ST depression, normally it should sort of go up a little. And ST depression looks like that. It's going down. But I just biked 40 miles the day before, Okay, so stop. Are you sure you got the GER? No H. What does the radiography say? Radiography showed the same thing. 3 segments of ischemia or blockage. Crazy. Now I'm just going past the Zoo interchange, heading onto Highway 94, and I'm trying to absorb all of this, and I'm not sure why, but this was the only word that came to mind. Like, seriously. The hell? Driving, going past Miller Park. Deep breath, deep breath. Doesn't make sense. So I've always been fairly good at self-reflection, and I started to think for a minute. Some of you know I do a ride to Holy Hill with the president of Marquette University a couple times a year. I call it Tour de Pedal. And so we invite the Marquette community and students, staff to come along. And there's usually about 100 folks or so that join in. That was going on in a week. So just a few days prior, I had ridden out there. 62 miles. You can see what the feet of climb is. Ridiculous amount, 2,000 feet of climb. Huge hills. That's one of the smaller ones. And as I was going up, there's a series of 3 big hills. As I was going up the first of those 3 hills, the chain on my bike fell off. And I had to walk up. Now I have about an $8,000 bike, and it has electronic shifting, meaning it has a little battery and it moves it automatically, the gears. There's no cables. It had just been tuned up and worked flawlessly. And every time I put that chain back on the bike, it fell off. As a result, I had to walk my bike up that hill. And what struck me as I pulled into my garage was what would have happened a week ago if I would have been able to go up that hill. Would I have died right there? This was in my mind as I went home, and I'm fairly certain I reached for a beer to try and digest all that. So what does this all have to do with project management? Well, the first stage of project management is this thing called project initiation, right? In project initiation, you identify your stakeholders and you build your project charter. Part of building that project charter is to come up with a purpose and objective, define your requirements, do your assumptions and constraints, governance, project high-level schedule and rough order of magnitude budget, and then also get an idea of what project risks are. Now, project risks are sort of an interesting thing. They're present in all projects, and most people think that they can be only negative. But some of them represent opportunities. In other words, not all risk is bad. So think of risk as uncertainty that matters. Some uncertainties might have helpful outcomes, and that's exactly what happened to me. So there is a risk, right, that of course your chain could drop, you could get a flat tire, all those things. But in this particular case, it was a pretty helpful outcome. As a sidebar, anytime you see a road named Big Hill, it's probably not going to be a good day. So I'm at home now, thinking, what the heck? And the doctor, who's been a family friend forever, says, okay, you need to see a cardiologist and have him interpret these results. And so, how many of you have a regular physician? Right? About half of the room. Now, how many of you have a cardiologist? Some. Not many, right? I certainly didn't. So now I have to go find a cardiologist. So, okay, I'll just take the generic clinic one, which in retrospect I started thinking, well, he's the guy who is available, so he's probably not the best one. And guess what? We didn't really get along at all. It was not a good fit. And I'm fortunate to have enough friends in medicine who are physicians and some family members who are in medicine as well, where I was able to call around. And I said, I want the best cardiologist. Who is the best cardiologist in Milwaukee? And I kept coming up with two names, Dr. Bajwa and Dr. DeFranco. Bajwa DeFranco. So where do you pick? It's Monday now. I've had the appointment with the bad cardiologist that I didn't bond with. He wants to haul me in for surgery. I'm like, no. So Bajwa DeFranco. And then it hit me. DeFranco. My sister used to read this magazine called Tiger Beat. The DeFranco family. Oh, that must be a sign. And look, their hit single, Heartbeat. It's a love beat. So that's who I called first. And I tell you, it was the most amazing thing because it was 11:30 when I made the call. Said, look, here's what's going on. I really would like to see him. Probably sooner than later. Well, can you get here in 20 minutes? I couldn't, but yes, sure, of course I can. So there I was, seeing Dr. DeFranco, heading to St. Luke's, chatting with him, talking to him. Like, here's the deal. There's this test, and, by the same token, I'm also, I've done this and that, and it just doesn't add up. And he said, I agree. I said, there's one more test that we can do, though. Insurance usually doesn't cover it. I said, well, that's never a good sign. It's called a calcium CT score. And insurance usually doesn't cover it, but it's like $125. Ugh, where do I write the check? So the girl was leaving. She happened to be a Marquette alum. She agreed to stay and take a later bus, and they haul me into this thing, which is, takes 2 minutes, and it does a quick CT of your chest and computes a calcification score of your heart, your coronary arteries. And you can see what some of the values are there. Right, 0, 11, sort of up to 100 is kind of okay. 100 to 200, this probably have some damage, and 400 or more, you probably need an angiogram. So, always the overachiever, I scored 1600. Yeah, you guys look like just about how I did. Like, wow. This still is not making sense. So Dr. DeFranco said, now kind of the scale's tilting the other way. We probably want to do an angiogram. Then we will know definitively exactly what is wrong. Now, does everyone know what an angiogram is? Some, maybe not. So what they do is they take and put a little hole in your femoral artery, and then they wind a little tube up and inject your heart with dye. And you'll know exactly what goes on. It's the de facto standard. You will know 100%. It's also $20,000. And they're puncturing an artery that if it bleeds out, you'll die in a couple minutes. So it's not something to take very lightly. And what Dr. DeFranco said was, the hardest part about all of this is waiting. You need to know, otherwise it's going to drive you crazy. And I agreed with that. I'm that sort of person. And he said, now the bad news is that I'm leaving for London tomorrow for 2 weeks. The good news is I called my wife and she'll hold dinner. So how about if we do it in 45 minutes? Right? I just came in for a quick appointment. Now you're doing all of this. It's like 3 o'clock. You know, I skipped lunch, raced down there, but I think he had a really compelling point in that, you know, it would be terrible to wait and not know. And so, despite the cost, despite the risk, let's just do it and get it done with. So that's kind of what it looks like, is they puncture a hole in your artery, and there's 3 people. It was a blast. We were laughing and joking all the time. They were really a lot of fun. I brought my cell phone in, and thanks to that, we have a lot of pictures of what was going on. So this is kind of what it looks like. That's me playing the role of the patient, laying horizontal. And here are the actual images of me. Get to know me from the inside out. So here's the first one. This is called the Widowmaker. People may have heard about that. See that little stretch there? That's about 80% blocked. So you want everything to be dark. The darker, the better. When it's light like that, that means there is significant blockage. More blockage there. Here's another one. 99% blockage there. More blockage throughout. So, you know, I'm going into this thinking, maybe they'll just put a stent in. But it looked more and more like it was going to be something more. And so here is kind of, for those of you unfamiliar with coronary artery disease, here's kind of what happens, right? You have plaque that builds up on the inside of your wall, and it'll narrow to the point where blood gets restricted. And then in worst case scenarios, plaque can build up or break off and completely restrict the blood flow. And that's what's called a heart attack. Heart attack, blood supply is lost to a particular area of the heart, so that tissue dies. And if too much of it dies, that means it can't pump very efficiently and oxygenate the rest of your body. And unfortunately, that means you die. So now I'm freaking out. I'm laying on the table, wishing I would have gotten some more drugs. And like, okay, so couple of stents maybe. He's like, if we stented you, we'd need probably 8 or 10. And they'd cross over each other, and you'd clank like the Tin Man. Well, you're probably going to need bypass surgery. Double, triple, you know, what do you think? No, quintuple. 5 bypasses. Crazy. You're sitting there on this table, joking around with people who do this all the time, and you're going, what on earth are you talking about? So for the next 20 minutes, a man stands on top of you and puts pressure on that artery so that it heals up. And you have more time to think. And I recalled one of my favorite things. I saw it in a magazine 30 years ago. And it says, true character is revealed when you come face to face with adversity. I'm like, okay, we can get through this. What's the first thing we want to do? We wanted to find the best cardiologist. Pretty confident I got that. The next thing, going to need a surgeon. Who is the best surgeon available? And I remembered a friend of mine had been on a date with this guy. He had just moved here, had incredible credentials, right? Went to Johns Hopkins, did his residency at New York Presbyterian, just really, really a top-notch guy. So while this man is sitting on top of me, I texted my friend Jess and said, can Eric do my surgery? And Eric texted back and said yes, yes he would. He was on a series of commercials for Aurora a couple of weeks ago and is really a gifted surgeon. He mainly specializes in aortic and valve repair, so hopefully this was easy peasy for him. And I felt pretty confident I had made the right decision. So back to our project management role again. We had gone from the initiating now into the planning stage. What's the first thing you do? Select the project team. Pretty sure I got the two best players that there are. Then what did I want to do next? Work on the scope. Identify the deliverables. Create the work breakdown structure. Identify the work packages. Do some sequencing. Estimate my resource. Do the schedule and budget. And then do some risk planning. I had a lot of work to do. But back to the project team. I think the practical application of selecting a surgeon is very analogous to working in a project and leading a project through to successful completion. You want to find the best resources for each task. We talked about the competent jerks versus lovable fools. I didn't want either of those. I wanted the competent, lovable communicators. And those can be hard to find. So this is where alliances and your leverage really matter. People often aren't going to do things just 'cause. You need to work on establishing those relationships. You know, I'd really like you to do this. Or, you know, so-and-so, a friend of mine really needs a good surgeon. So build those relationships. It's not only important in your day-to-day existence, but sometimes those alliances may come in handy. Familiarity breeds excellence. Oftentimes you'll find that people who know each other, they know how they communicate, they know how each other works. A lot of times that can really help a project team exceed rather than just succeed. Think of, you know, the Brett Favre, right, when he, or Aaron Rodgers, when he gets new receivers. I mean, they're just not in sync. They don't have that familiarity of if the guy's going to turn left or turn right. Onboard the communicators. It was important that I have surgeons and physicians who were good communicators, not ones who decided, well, he's just a patient. I have email addresses for both of those folks, and we talk all the time still. They were very good at communicating what was happening, not only to me, but then also to my mom and sisters and family members, taking the time to be able to do that. And the other thing about project team members is don't fear adjustments. If someone isn't working out, don't be afraid to make a move. This can go for project team members or vendors. If a vendor isn't working out, don't be afraid to say, you're not meeting our expectations. And if you have an in-out clause, don't be afraid to move on. So, after the man is done standing on me, I go up to my room because they're going to have me stay overnight. It's like 9 o'clock now. And, I ran out of my office. It's still open. There's a computer there. So I make some phone calls, have people go and shut that all down, stay overnight. My mom and 3 sisters come. And then you start, everybody leaves around 10 o'clock, and you start thinking and going into that planning mode of some of the things you have to do. In the project management world, we would call it identifying work packages. For example, how many of you have an advance directive? Couple? How many of you have a will? Should something happen or you're incapacitated, who has access to all your usernames and passwords to get into bank accounts, websites, all that stuff? Who knows, if you're married it might be different, I'm not. What about your bank accounts, savings accounts, your financial investments? Who knows all that stuff? What about your retirement, your 401k or 401b, all that stuff? Who has access to that information? And you get to think about, where do you want to be buried if things don't work out? How do you want your funeral to be? Do you want someone to speak? Do you want it big? Do you want it small? I said I wanted it at Jesu. I wanted my cycling team to carry me in their spandex. And I wanted Mike Lovell to promise to say something nice about me. So that's how you spend your ensuing days, doing things like that. And I also decided I'm going to throw myself a party. Cinco de bypass. I said, help me welcome my new arteries. And there was a couple hundred people that showed up. I think it's probably because it was, I said open bar. But, I wanted to have one last good time with all my friends. And it was quite an experience. There's one other thing I wanted to do. That was on a Wednesday. The surgery was scheduled for Friday. On Thursday, I went for a bike ride. Even though, don't tell the cardiologist. I wanted to have one last time on the bike. And so we talked about planning before. So I had done my scope statement. The scope of this surgery will be to saw my sternum in half and place 5 new arteries inside. Don't, do any knee surgery or anything else. Just the arteries is enough today. Thank you. My deliverables. What are the deliverables? Well, That would be a bright and shiny new heart. The work breakdown structure, the work packages to create all of that, the activity sequencing, the resources, the time, the cost. How long would I be out? Probably a week in the hospital and about 2 or 3 months recovering. So when I went to bed that night, I was comfortable that I had done all of the planning that I needed, and I actually slept pretty well. Might have been because of the Valium they had given me, but I slept pretty well. Until, unfortunately, at 4 o'clock in the morning, when they make you get up and do this nasty little shower where you have to take this little thing and scrub every area of your body with something a little less coarse than, number 20 sandpaper. It's quite an experience. So you get to the hospital at about 6, and thank goodness right away they gown you up and you sit in the waiting room. And then you're waiting a little bit longer, so your family comes in and takes pictures of you. I'll never forget, there was a guy on the other side of the curtain over there, and he was also waiting to go in, and they were asking him, "What are you here for? What are you here for?" And he said, "I just couldn't stay away from that cocaine, boss. Just couldn't stay away from that cocaine." And this is something that became a theme later on, is you get angry that you are sort of stuck in this situation through no fault of your own. So thankfully I didn't have to listen to that too much longer, and they brought me into the operating room. And if you've had surgery before, one of the things I always hope for, well, there's 2 things I hope for. 1, I hope I don't sit there too long before they just knock me out, and 2, I hope I'm not intubated when they wake me up, so I don't have the tube down my throat. And so the good news is I didn't have to wait very long. I remember looking around, and that was it. And then they went to work on me. So they do 2 things. They strip a big vein out of your leg. It's called the sphenous vein. And then they take your mammary arteries and harvest those as well. Why do they do that? Because those are arteries and they perform a lot better than veins. So you're numb all over. They stop your heart. You are on heart-lung bypass for about 2 or 3 hours. And they do just take a saw and go right down the middle of your chest, crack it open. Sometime around 3 o'clock, I was wheeled back into it's called the surgical or cardio intensive care unit. And there I went. And there's that little white pad with the wires. Those are wires going through my skin onto my heart in case they have to pace it, in case anything goes wrong. That thing on my neck is called a central line. So if they need to give me drugs, they're not going to mess around with, something in your arm. It's going to go right into your neck, much quicker effect. Had a lot of drugs, fentanyl, I don't know, there's a bunch of stuff there. That's kind of what it looks like. A lot longer. And that little white gauze area, that was probably the worst of the entire experience. Those are where 4 chest tubes were in. A chest tube is a way of saying garden hose. They're about the diameter of a quarter, and there's a little hole inside you, and there's about that much of it in there. And that's to drain all of the fluid that accumulates after you've had a big surgery like that. Now, 2 of them came out a day later, but those other 2 stayed in for 5 blessed days. And the problem became anytime you got up to move, that was okay, but when you sat down, those things were wrapped around and would settle inside, and it was a new experience in pain. This is about 30 minutes. That cup says rule number 5. If any of you are cyclists in the room, you know there's a group called the Velominati. They have a series of rules. There's over 100 of them for cycling. Rule number 5 is the one most often referred to, and it stands for harden the heck up, except they don't use the word heck. So I made it through the first day. Saturday, the drugs started wearing off. Really started to be in a lot of pain. And I kind of ran into a nurse who just wasn't being very cooperative. So for pain, I was on morphine, Vicodin, and Percodan. And it still wasn't doing the job. And I mean, you're literally screaming in pain, going to the bathroom 30, 40 minutes. It was not a pleasant time. So, ever the good project manager, I called one of my resources, my friend Jess, who's a physician. And I said, Jess, can you text Dr. Weiss? And she did. It was Saturday. She texted him about 9:30. He was in my room about 10:30. He came from his home downtown. And so there was a wonder drug that worked very well, a 4th pain med, whose name escapes me, but that one in combination with all the others really did a number. And by that afternoon, I was smiling. So, came to be Tuesday, Wednesday. I had set several objectives and deliverables for the surgery. That was important to me. And the biggest overriding one was in September, there was a cycling race called Ride Across Wisconsin. It was 175 miles in one day. I mean, you just ride it. Like, that was my goal. That's what I was shooting for in my recovery. And so I had both my cycling jerseys up. And when I needed to grit my teeth, when the pain was too bad, that's what I looked at and that's what I focused on. Wednesday night, I decided to treat the nursing staff to Leon's Custard. It's right across the road. So I had to sneak out, of course, and then you're on telemetry, right? So they know you're gone. And so there I am walking across the street, 4 days post-operative surgical central line in and, ordering 6 turtle sundaes. But it was fun, and they appreciated it. When I got back, Mr. Kurt, where are you? We were trying to find you the entire time. Yeah, I don't know what happened, but here, would you like some ice cream? So this kind of led me to think about project execution, right? What are the stages? You direct and manage project work. Between myself, family members, friends, we were directing and had a say in the level of care that was happening. We did QA, we managed the project team, we managed communications, we conducted procurement, and we managed stakeholder engagement. And one thing about stakeholder engagement, never, ever, ever let your sisters hold your cell phone. Because those were the more tame pictures. The other ones, they were Facebooking all over to everyone. It was not a pretty sight. So Thursday came for discharge, and my neighbor was nice enough to come and pick me up, and got home around 3 o'clock, dropped off all my stuff, and we went to the beer garden. Hung out at Estabrook for a while, had a beer, sat and talked with the owner, Hans, for a little bit, offered to buy me another one. I said, you know, the heart says yes, but the Vicodin says no, I better go home. So it was good to get out. And so in my post-recovery, I kept that ride across Wisconsin in my mind. That's what got me up every morning and training. You weren't allowed to ride outside for 8 weeks. Because if you fall over, you crack open like an egg. So, right, and you spill stuff out into the street, it would not be a pleasant sight. So, the trainer became my best friend. I found other uses for my bike, like to hang laundry. I went and used the immersive spin lab here at work, or at Marquette. I did spin classes with some of my cycling peeps. And in the end, when June was over, I had ridden 555 miles without ever even going anywhere. So I was pretty intense because I'd never had any symptoms before, and I wanted to get back to a level. It was summer in Wisconsin. Those 6 weeks are really, really important. So I had a follow-up appointment with Dr. DeFranco again. Wanted to make sure I was on track to go and do my race in September. And I remembered back that he said his wife had held dinner for him that night. And so I thought, well, the least I can do is bring the guy some wine. So I did. I brought him a couple bottles of wine. Again, we did the blood work. And, although it was exceptional before, now it was even lower, right? Cholesterol 120 and all the other numbers looking really good. I said, okay, one last test. I want to have another cardiac stress test. I want to make sure at mile number 97 my heart isn't going to explode. So we go to do the cardiac stress test, which this time isn't going to involve radiography, it's going to involve ultrasound. So the technician is getting things set up, doing some preliminary testing. She asked the loaded question, so did Dr. DeFranco say you have anything around your heart like swelling? No? Let me get him for a minute. So sure enough, you can see on the ultrasound that big black area was water between my heart and the pericardium. That was probably normal post-operative swelling, no way to really know. But what it did mean is that my heart wasn't beating as efficiently as it should, and that likely the ride across Wisconsin was not going to happen. That was okay. What can we do about it? How can we fix it? We know the issue. How do we manage it? Well, there's this wonderful drug called colchicine. They found out quite by accident that although it's been a cure for gout for years and years, it also has been found useful in the treatment of pericarditis, or getting rid of that water. Unfortunately, it also has some really bad side effects, like, pretty much got sick every morning. It just was not a good drug. But look what happened. By August, that swelling had gone all the way down to the point where it was really almost nothing. So it was worth it. So this leads us to the next part of managing a project. It's called monitoring and controlling. You do quality management. You perform risk management, cost management, change management, procurement management, communication management, and lastly, anyone guess? Issue management. And that's exactly what was being done here. So issues come up in every project. Never seen one where it does not happen. Sometimes they can be the precursor or the predecessor to a risk. In other words, you identify a risk and it comes true, or they can just pop out of nowhere. Right? So a risk could have been that there was a chance of complications after a surgery like this. And this was one of the issues that arose out of that. And so how do you manage those issues? Much in the same way you would do in a project. You rigorously attack them. And you do this through consulting with past projects, with subject matter experts, anything you can do to try and correct it in a timely manner. So in this particular case, there was a drug that was proven to work, a proven fix. So unfortunately, didn't get to do the ride across America, ride across Wisconsin. There is a ride across America. That's an even crazier thing. Ride across the United States in a couple weeks. Honest. So I had 15 more days before I was technically allowed to ride. My cardiologist may be listening, so I won't tell him, but I actually probably didn't wait all of those 15 days. And I took a ride along the Oak Leaf Trail, and can anyone guess where I ended up?
Estabrook.
Yep, Estabrook Park, having a beer and celebrating. A couple weeks later, I did one of my favorite rides, which is like a quick after-work 40-miler to Cedarburg. And I was trying to think, what could I do? Since I didn't do the ride across Wisconsin, what could I do? What was symbolic? What would keep me going? What's a goal that I could have? And I thought, well, August 30th is coming up. That will mark 100 days since my surgery. 100 days. What could we do? Seemed like 100 miles would be a great thing. So I sent a shout out to a few people, see if anybody wanted to go with me. I mean, that's a 6-hour proposition. And there were like 5 people that said they would go with me. People had other things to do, and so, but as long as I had 5 or 6 that were, enough to carry me if anything happened, I was good. So we decided to, of course, meet at Estabrook Park. And I will never forget that morning. I live about 4 miles away and was going to bike there, but it was really foggy. So I thought, well, I'll drive there. And I turned the corner and went into the parking lot. And there was my entire cycling team waiting for me. They weren't going to do the whole ride, but they wanted to at least see me off for part of it. And I still get shivers up and down my spine thinking about what a great gesture that was. And so we rode. We rode the Ozaukee County Interurban Trail all the way to Terry Andre State Park and back. It happens to be about 101 miles. Here's kind of our little crew on the way back, probably about 57 miles in. And this is me at Terry Andre Park. So 101 miles, we were a little over 16 miles an hour, a little bit slow, but we made it. And by coincidence, we ended at Estabrook Park, so since we had used their parking lot, it felt like I should have a beer and support the place afterwards. So people say, how are you doing now? Well, I have this virtual trainer, and this is a course that I ran and use a lot. It's a virtual ride around in the Netherlands. About a month after the surgery, I was averaging about 16.7 miles an hour. This morning, I was up at about 19. So pretty significant, and I would expect that to continue. Which brings us to the last part of a project. Everyone's favorite, project closure. Some projects never get that way, it seems, but this one did. So what do you want to do in project closure? Confirm that you've met all the requirements of the stakeholders. Yep. Have all the deliverables been met and accepted, not only by the project manager, but also by all stakeholders? Do they agree with what you've done? It's always good to recognize anyone who's done outstanding work. Thank you, Dr. Weiss, and thank you, Dr. DeFranco. In another type of project, you would disperse resources, human resources, equipment would go on to other places or go back to where it originally had worked. You want to archive. Make sure that there's a sufficient transfer of knowledge, right? This video serves as someone wants to know what this experience is like. Welcome to share it with you. And lastly, conduct an assessment and perform a lessons learned. So if you work with the same group again or are involved in another project, gives you a chance to kind of reflect back on your entire experience. So what were my lessons learned? The first thing is, if I can borrow from Ignatius, is that all things in life are gifts from God. I didn't realize it at the time, but dropping that chain and not being able to make it up that hill, it's the weirdest thing ever. And at the time, I was mad and embarrassed and hoped no one would see me walking up this hill. But every time I tried putting that chain back on, it would fall off. And arguably, this whole experience has been a gift as well. Your imagination will take you as far as your mind will let you. Who on earth is going to get out of the hospital after having quintuple bypass surgery and ride their bike that day? Who is going to ride 100 miles 3 months after that kind of surgery? Well, no one told me it can't be done, so why not try it? The things you imagine and the things you accomplish are only going to go as far as your mind will let you. Hills or obstacles are put there to remind us how important something is. Be a hill seeker. Look for things that challenge you. Look for things that engage you and require you to push yourself. Right? No one wants to go on a flat road. It's boring. Everyone wants to go to the mountains and see what's the beautiful majesty of the scenery. I encountered those hills, all the obstacles, the pericarditis, some of the other things. I took the position that, this is just reminding me how very important this is, and I want to succeed in spite of what's going on. And lastly is, I cherish most in my life right now that which I wish had never happened to me. It's been an unbelievable 8 months, and even now it seems very surreal. I don't think of it at all, you know, except maybe I'll scratch my chest and I can't really tell if I'm scratching it or not, you know, because you're numb. But it has opened up a whole new world. The people that reach out to you that you never thought would are amazing. The president of the university spends 45 minutes with you visiting. I'm sure he had a lot better things to do. Friends that come out of the woodwork, acquaintances. There was someone who works on campus who just the day I came out of surgery showed up in my room. And I had worked with this person 5 minutes. Why was that? Because he had gone through 2 of these operations himself. It's an amazing experience, though I wouldn't recommend it, and not sure I would want to do it again. But I've come to accept it and appreciate it. And like Steve Jobs would say, oh yeah, and one more thing. Make sure you password protect your cell phone. Thank you all very much for listening, for being such a good audience. If you have any questions, concerns, I'm happy to entertain them now. Unless I've stumped you all, or you just have to go to the bathroom because it's break time.
Did you notice any project management best practices going on their side?
At the hospital?
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, there really was sort of a certain process orientation going on where, you know, people would come in and there were resources that would be in charge of checking your medicines, and people that would be in charge of making sure you were comfortable, and people who were in charge of taking you to the bathroom and shooting films. And so, yeah. Other questions?
Do we know anything about the cause of this disease?
In me?
Yeah.
The only thing, well, there's a big genetic component. You know, I mean, in me, what he said was, oh, this started in your 20s. And I don't think I was any different than anyone. You know, you have your kind of wild and crazy college years, and you're, you know, living in California, and you have an In-N-Out burger, and then you go to a bar and have a couple beers, and you're smoking a cigarette, and, you know, just like regular stuff. But, you know, I can't remember the last time I ate fast food. I, you know, just avoid all that stuff. So a strong component is genetic. Anyone else? Nope. So my advice would be, if you do have some sort of risk factor, you know, which I had none, no family history, nothing, make sure, get yourself checked out, get an annual physical, and have your cholesterol. If not you, then also the loved ones in your family. Thank you.